In the morning of 2010, in a desolate reed field on the outskirts of Shandong City, a horrifying discovery stunned the entire area. The body of a young woman was found lying quietly among the dense bushes, bearing signs of a brutal murder. The area was typically deserted, with only a small dirt road leading to the nearest residential neighborhood. The victim was a university student who had just returned home for the National Day holiday. But instead of a warm family reunion, this holiday turned into a nightmarish tragedy. Who could be so heartless as to take this young woman's life? And what had brought her to such a remote place on that fateful night? Time, location, and the evidence left behind had begun to offer clues. Yet the identity of the killer remained shrouded in darkness. The investigation was quickly accelerated, with each new lead uncovering deeper secrets no one had anticipated. Stay with us until the end of the video as we delve into this case filled with twists and turns. Horrifying discovery in the reed field. In the final days of 2010, in the outskirts of Zhang Village, Shandong Province, China, during the National Day holiday on October 5th, the sky began to darken. At 5 p.m., a local farmer, having finished his day's work in the fields, wiped the sweat from his soiled face and prepared to head home. As he walked along his usual dirt path, passing a reed field, he suddenly noticed an unusually barren patch of land, where the reeds had been flattened as if something was lying beneath. Curious, he approached to investigate. As he got closer, he was shocked to realize it was a woman. She was lying there, her body covered in blood, her dress hiked up, and her legs marked with scratches. Her face was swollen, making it unrecognizable. Fear surged within him, but he still decided to approach to check if she was still alive. Placing his hand near her nose to feel for breath, he was met with an undeniable coldness. She was no longer breathing. Her skin had turned a pale purple, and he immediately realized this was likely a serious murder. Panicked, he quickly grabbed his phone and called the police. Within moments, officers arrived at the scene. They swiftly secured the area, setting up a perimeter to prevent anyone from entering unless authorized. Investigators carefully documented the scene, taking photos from multiple angles, ensuring that no detail, no matter how small, would be overlooked. They searched the surroundings and found 10 pieces of evidence that could be linked to the case. Footprints, fingerprints, and DNA samples would all play a crucial role in identifying the suspect. When the forensic team conducted the autopsy, they quickly determined that the victim was a woman, approximately 20 to 30 years old. She had been brutally murdered, with a total of 11 stab wounds, causing the surrounding reed field to be stained red with blood. Her arms and legs were scratched, and her face was swollen, indicating that she had been tortured before her death. The stab wounds were mostly concentrated in the torso, likely causing severe damage to vital organs such as the intestines, stomach, liver, or kidneys. Based on these signs, the forensic experts speculated that the cause of death might have been excessive blood loss. Her dress was lifted, exposing the victim's genital area, and the police found sperm in this region. The body had stiffened and showed no signs of decomposition, suggesting that the time of death had occurred within the last 24 hours. There were no traces left around the crime scene, indicating that the victim had likely been killed at that very spot. Near the body, the police found a bag and a wallet. Inside the wallet were identification documents, which allowed them to identify the victim as Yang Luzhou, a 22-year-old student at Shandong University. However, aside from her ID, there was no money or valuables in the wallet. This led the police to suspect that the case might involve robbery, sexual assault, followed by a brutal murder. But one question lingered in the minds of the investigators. Did the killer really need to stab the victim 11 times? Could there have been some deep-seated hatred driving the killer to such a violent act? Police hypotheses and the identity of the victim. based on the state of the body and the crime scene. The police proposed two possible theories regarding the identity of the killer. The first theory suggested that the killer might have been a thief. After stealing the victim's belongings, he may have lost control upon seeing the victim's beauty and assaulted her. However, fearing he would be caught, he decided to kill her to cover up his crime. The police speculated that the murder could have been committed by someone with little experience in such acts. With 11 stab wounds, it seemed likely that the killer was uncertain whether the first stab would be enough to kill her, so he kept stabbing to ensure her death. The second theory was quite different. The police suspected that the killer had a deep hatred for the victim. The brutal stabbings, along with the severe torture, made them believe that the murderer was motivated by personal animosity. After committing the crime, he may have staged the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong, hoping to deceive the police and cover up his true motive. The area around the crime scene, near the reed field, was sparsely populated. The farmer who reported the crime was the only one who frequently passed by this road on his way home, and on that morning, he had taken a different route. Given the isolation of the area, the police were unable to find any helpful witnesses, and there were no cameras to capture any significant evidence to assist in the investigation. The police collected 10 pieces of evidence from the crime scene and brought the body back to the station for further investigation. The forensic team conducted a detailed and meticulous autopsy to determine the cause of death and other relevant factors. When they began to examine the victim's body, the forensic experts assessed the depth of the stab wounds and the direction in which they had penetrated the body. From this, they could determine the manner of attack and whether the wounds had been caused by the same weapon. Upon examination, the experts concluded that the killer had been standing or kneeling on the ground while the victim lay beneath him, suggesting that the attacker must have had considerable strength to overpower the victim in such a manner. The stab wounds to the chest and below the chest were shallow, but those to the abdomen were deeper. The fatal wound was to the stomach, which had been pierced, severing multiple blood vessels and causing massive internal bleeding. The deep wound caused severe blood loss, resulting in shock. Other stab wounds damaged nearby organs such as the liver and pancreas, causing serious complications, including internal hemorrhaging. In addition to the stab wounds, the victim's body showed numerous scratches and bruises, indicating she had fought back fiercely against the assault. Her face had also been attacked. Forensic experts examined her facial bones and discovered fractures in areas such as the cheekbones, jaw, and facial skull, which caused her face to swell and bruise. After collecting samples from the victim's body, forensic experts conducted tests to determine the time of death and whether the body had reacted to any toxins or drugs. The results indicated that the victim had died around 2 a.m. on October 4th, approximately 24 hours before the body was discovered. There were no signs of toxins, stimulants, or anesthetics in her system. The forensic team also carefully examined the victim's genital area and surrounding regions, finding significant tearing and damage. Inside the uterus, they discovered sperm, and after testing, they confirmed that both the sperm found in the uterus and the sperm found externally on the body belonged to the same individual. Once the tests were completed, the police identified the victim using her ID documents. She was Yang Luzhou, a 22-year-old student at Shandong University. The police then informed her family and requested them to come to the station for an identification. The screening process and narrowing down the suspects. On the afternoon of October 5th, a couple arrived at the police station. The woman introduced herself as Luzhou's older sister, and the man accompanying her was her husband, the victim's brother-in-law. When they entered the room to identify the body, the sister glanced at the victim and could barely recognize her. The victim's face had been so severely disfigured that she was unrecognizable at first glance. However, when the sister saw the birthmark on the right side of the victim's neck, she immediately identified her as her younger sister. She began to tear up, but she didn't sob loudly. She remained silent, trying to suppress her grief. Her face showed the pain of an unbearable loss, and she covered her mouth with her hand, her body growing weak as she fainted. The police understood that the two sisters must have been carrying an unspeakable burden, likely a deep and hidden secret. After Lu Bao regained her composure, the police began to take her statement. According to Yang Lu Bao, the victim, Yang Luzhou, was a 22-year-old final-year journalism student at Shandong University. The sister explained that Luzhou had come home a few days prior to celebrate the National Day holiday, on the night before the incident. However, Luzhou did not return home. Lu Bao thought her younger sister might have stayed over at her boyfriend's house, so she wasn't overly concerned. However, the next morning, Lu Bao had to leave early for a meeting with friends. By the afternoon, she received the heartbreaking news from the police that her sister had been murdered. She admitted that she still couldn't fully grasp what had happened. Lu Bao added that her sister was an outgoing and lively person. The two sisters used to confide in each other, but since Luzhou had gone to university, they had grown apart, each living their own life and no longer interfering in each other's affairs. Because of this, Lu Bao didn't know if her sister had any conflicts with anyone. All she knew was that Luzhou had a boyfriend from their hometown, and they had been in a relationship since her third year of high school. What further confused the police was that just 2 days before Luzhou's death, a robbery and rape had occurred in the area. The victim was a 34-year-old woman who had been returning home from work when a stranger had accosted her and attempted to steal her handbag. However, upon realizing that the woman was attractive, the attacker had resorted to sexual assault. The police investigated the incident and quickly retrieved footage from nearby surveillance cameras to track the whereabouts of the perpetrator. The victim of the robbery and rape had been able to identify her attacker. She described him as having a tattoo of a woman in a kimono on his left arm. This detail allowed the police to narrow down their suspect pool, and by October 6th, they had arrested 3 individuals. The victim confirmed that one of them was indeed the man who had stolen her bag and attempted to assault her. The police continued their investigation, including a DNA test on the semen found on Luzhou's body, to see if there was any connection between the murder and the robbery-rape suspect. However, the results showed that the semen did not match the sample from the suspect. When the police showed the robbery suspect a photo of Luzhou, he denied ever having met her, insisting that the only woman he had assaulted was the 34-year-old victim from the robbery. From Lu Bao's testimony, the police learned that her younger sister rarely carried cash, keeping most of her assets in a bank account or on her phone. Moreover, she only used a basic mobile phone, not an expensive one. This raised doubts about the true motive behind the killer's brutality. For a young woman to venture into such an isolated area at night was undoubtedly unusual and suspicious. Clues from the victim's relationships. On the night of the murder, the police quickly determined that if the last person Luzhou met was her boyfriend, as suggested by her sister, his testimony could provide critical insights into the case. Her boyfriend, Cheng Zheng, was the same age as her and a business administration student at Shandong University. The two had been friends since their first year of high school but didn't start dating until their junior year. Before taking their university entrance exams, they had promised to attend the same university. Both came from relatively affluent families. Cheng Zheng's family owned an electronics business, which he was set to manage after graduation. The police interviewed Cheng Zheng about his relationship with Luzhou and the events surrounding the day of the murder. Clearly saddened by her death, he explained that since they returned to their hometowns for the holiday, he had not seen her. They had only communicated by phone and planned to meet at a later date. While they were close during their time in Jinan, they had decided to spend the holiday with their respective families and friends, especially since Cheng Zheng had many friends in their hometown, while Luzhou did not. During the break, she typically spent time with her parents and sister, baking with her mother, or playing chess with her father. When asked if he knew why Luzhou might have gone to the reed field on the night of her death, Cheng Zheng insisted that he had never heard her mention the place. He described her as lively but careful, always adhering to self-protection principles. He was confident that something extraordinary must have compelled her to go to such a deserted area. He also said that she had never mentioned any conflicts with anyone, and apart from her family and boyfriend, she was not particularly close to anyone in their hometown. This contradiction, between Lu Bao assuming her sister was with her boyfriend and Cheng Zheng asserting that he hadn't met her that day, prompted the police to consider the possibility that someone else had lured Lu Zhou to the reed field, where she was killed. Continuing their investigation, the police explored the other relationships in Lu Zhou's life. She was in her final year of university and had moved off campus, no longer living in the dormitories. Her former roommate, Shi Huanin, who was also her closest friend in college, shared insights into her personality. The two had been close since their freshman year and maintained their bond throughout. Shi Huanin described Lu Zhou as kind, outgoing, and generous. She never felt uncomfortable around her friend and recalled that, before heading home, Lu Zhou had even promised to bring back some local treats. Little did anyone know that her trip home would ultimately claim her life. When the police mentioned the possibility that Lu Zhou might have gone to the reed field alone, Shi Huanin suddenly remembered something from their high school days. Lu Zhou had once been stalked and harassed by a classmate. This boy had pursued her since their first year of high school, but his intense attention only made her frightened, not flattered. By their third year of high school, when Lu Zhou had officially started dating Cheng Zheng, the boy refused to back off and continued to harass her. Fortunately, Cheng Zheng had stepped in and helped Lu Zhou at that time. This incident had infuriated Lu Zhou's family, and they had reported the harassment to the school, resulting in the boy being expelled. This was an unforgettable memory for Lu Zhou. She had shared the story with Huanin, but at the time, Huanin had no idea that this memory would become a crucial clue in the investigation later on. Every time Lu Zhou recalled the past, she felt a vague sense of fear, always worried that her past stalker might one day come seeking revenge. Thanks to Huanin's testimony, the police were led to a new suspect, Zhu Zhenlin, the boy who had harassed Lu Zhou years earlier. The situation became even more concerning when the possibility of revenge as a motive for the murder began to emerge. The suspect and the police's stalemate. The police began to dig deeper into Zhu Zhenlin's life. After being expelled for threatening Lu Zhou, he had dropped out of school and worked as a laborer. Now, Zhenlin was married and lived with his wife in an area not far from where the murder had occurred. The police decided to visit his home to gather more information. When they arrived, Zhenlin's wife seemed surprised but greeted them warmly. After a short wait, Zhenlin emerged from the bathroom, and the police began to question him. On the day of the incident, Zhenlin stated that he had finished work and returned home as usual. He had been working during the holiday period because the extra hours allowed him to earn more money. Zhenlin was very different from what the police had imagined of someone with a history of harassment. He appeared gentle, calm, and attentive to his wife. When he heard the news of Lu Zhou's death, he seemed genuinely shocked. Even though they hadn't been in contact for a long time, he still remembered her vividly, thinking of her as a bright and lively girl. Zhenlin explained that during their school days, Lu Zhou had been a radiant presence, always cheerful, loved by her family, and cherished by those around her. He was just one of her classmates. After he confessed his feelings and was rejected, Lu Zhou had begun to avoid him. This had left him feeling hurt and confused, unable to understand why. He said that she had been his first love, and he thought about her more than anyone else. Zhenlin didn't understand that Lu Zhou didn't like him, and that his feelings for her had become nothing more than an annoyance in her eyes. She didn't want any kind of relationship with him, which was why she started avoiding him at every opportunity. At that time, Zhenlin realized that love had to come from both sides, and you couldn't force someone to love you. But at the age of 18, Zhenlin couldn't fully comprehend this. The intensity of his emotions and the impulsiveness of youth led him to act inappropriately. After Lu Zhou began dating Cheng Zhang, Zhenlin felt a deep jealousy and wanted to understand why he couldn't be like Cheng Zhang. He just wanted to ask her one question, but his actions unintentionally scared her. This led to him being expelled from school. Lu Zhou's family made a huge deal out of the situation, and from then on, Zhenlin's life was changed forever. When his parents found out that their son had been expelled, they were furious, but they didn't scold him much. Instead, they tried to find ways for him to continue his education at another school. If he couldn't attend a regular school, they would help him pursue adult education. The Chu family wasn't wealthy, but his parents still spent a significant amount of money to help him continue his studies. However, Zhenlin didn't want to keep troubling his parents. He decided to quit school, believing that education wasn't the only path to success. He was content with his current life, living with his wife, and didn't want to be a burden to his family any longer. After deciding to quit school, Zhenlin began working as a laborer on a construction site. Years of hard work eventually allowed him to rise to a managerial position. Now, he had enough to take care of his small family, support his elderly parents, and look after his wife. His life, while not wealthy, was fulfilling, and he felt a deep sense of happiness from it. His wife was someone he met while working on the construction site. She worked in the office but occasionally visited the site for inspections. From the moment they met, she was impressed by his hard work and enthusiasm. She didn't judge him based on his family background, nor did she demand an expensive dowry. Zhenlin was deeply moved by his wife's selflessness. She not only took great care of their small family, but was also very devoted to his parents. Because of this, Zhenlin had no reason to give up a family like this, especially to seek revenge. He didn't harbor any hatred toward Lu Zhou. On the contrary, he was grateful to her. The incident all those years ago had helped him realize the true meaning of life, forcing him to grow and understand so much more. After comparing Zhenlin's sperm sample with the one found on the victim, the results did not match. With no concrete evidence, the police were unable to charge Zhenlin and could only keep him as a suspect for further investigation. Days passed without progress, and the case remained frustratingly unclear. Unexpected turn of the case. The culprit is revealed. Then, on the evening of October 10th, an unexpected twist changed everything. While the forensic team worked tirelessly to uncover more clues from the victim, the police were still grappling for a new lead. Suddenly, Lu Zhou's sister, Lu Bao, stormed into the police station. Her face was frantic, her body bore visible injuries, and she clutched a mobile phone tightly in her hand. Without hesitation, she shouted at the officers. "It's him!" she exclaimed, her voice shaking. "My husband is the one who killed my sister." She quickly handed the phone to the investigators. Displayed on the screen was a shocking image, a naked photo of Lu Zhou taken in a bathroom. Lu Bao explained that the phone belonged to her husband, Xia Huangqin. Earlier that day, while their parents were out, she had stumbled upon the photo on his phone by accident. The discovery had left her in shock, and she panicked. When Huangqin realized she had seen the photo, he flew into a rage and assaulted her. Amid the chaos, her cries for help drew the attention of neighbors. Seizing the opportunity while he was distracted, she escaped the house, hailed a taxi, and came straight to the police station. "He's the one who killed my sister," she repeated, her voice trembling with desperation. She pleaded with the police to arrest him immediately. The police didn't hesitate. They immediately mobilized their teams to locate the suspect. One group went to Lu Bao's house to search for Huangqin, while another contacted traffic police, providing his vehicle's registration details to intercept the car if seen. When officers arrived at the house, they found the gate wide open, but no sign of the car. Questioning the neighbors revealed that they had heard loud arguments from the house earlier. By the time they approached to intervene, Huang Qin had already driven away. The police quickly coordinated with the traffic division to track him down. After an intense 4-hour search, they successfully apprehended him. Upon his arrest, Huang Qin was furious and uncooperative. He refused to provide a sperm sample for testing. Investigators began examining the phone that Lu Bao had handed over. While the call logs and messages had been meticulously erased since the day of Lu Zhou's death, leaving only recent data, digital forensics experts were brought in to recover deleted information. In the recovered data, they found a damning clue: 3 explicit photos of Lu Zhou in the bathroom, later identified as the bathroom in Lu Bao's home. Even more incriminating was the discovery of a threatening text message sent by Huang Qin to Lu Zhou on the night of her murder. The text included one of the explicit photos and was clearly intended to intimidate her. Despite the fact that Huang Qin had married Lu Bao 4 years after Lu Zhou had gone to university, the police could not understand why he had acted so brutally. They questioned why he would take such extreme measures, especially considering that he hadn't seen Lu Zhou much after his marriage. The investigators were determined not to overlook this and continued to press on with their investigation. Although Huang Qin initially refused to undergo a sperm test, the mounting evidence left him with little choice but to comply with the police's demands. The results of the test confirmed what the investigators had suspected. The sperm found on Lu Zhou matched Huang Qin's. Faced with this undeniable proof, Huang Qin could no longer deny his involvement and began to explain the reasons behind Lu Zhou's tragic death. Discrimination between rich and poor, the root of crime. Huang Qin explained that when he first met Lu Bao, he was recovering from an injury sustained in a workplace accident. It was at the hospital that he met Lu Bao, a beautiful and confident woman. He was initially intimidated by her family's superior social standing. Lu Bao's parents were both professors, enjoying comfortable pensions after their retirements. Her family, which included Lu Zhou, lived in financial security and enjoyed the respect of their peers. Despite the obvious class differences, Huang Qin recalled that at the time, he didn't dwell too much on the disparity between their families. His feelings for Lu Bao were strong, and they were deeply in love. He chose to marry her and agreed to live with her parents. However, after they married, Huang Qin began to feel suffocated. He felt trapped, as though he were imprisoned in his in-laws' home. While Lu Bao worked long hours at the hospital, he did little more than get by. With no ambition to better his own life, he realized that all he did was eat and spend the money his wife earned. Lu Bao, on the other hand, was dedicated to both her job and her family. Despite her busy schedule, she tried to take care of her parents and manage the household. But her parents, who placed great value on education and career success, began to complain about Huang Qin's lack of purpose and ambition. They were displeased that their daughter had to look after a husband they considered useless, with no clear future. The constant criticism from his in-laws further fanned the flames of resentment in Huang Qin. He kept these feelings to himself, fearing that if Lu Bao found out, she might think less of him. But as time passed, his hatred grew. His frustration reached a boiling point every time Lu Zhou came home. She would often bring her boyfriend, Cheng Zheng, along. Cheng Zheng was the complete opposite of Huang Qin. Coming from a wealthy and respectable family, he was well-educated and always humble. He quickly became the ideal son-in-law in the eyes of Lu Bao's family. Whenever he visited, he would not only bring gifts but also expensive items that demonstrated his thoughtfulness and respect. Meanwhile, Lu Bao's parents would shower him with attention and warmth, while Huang Qin was treated with cold indifference. For Huang Qin, this was a harsh reminder of his own inferiority. The way Cheng Zheng was embraced by the family made him feel like an outsider in his own home. He seethed with jealousy and hatred every time he witnessed the warmth and respect Cheng Zheng received. This ongoing situation became a deep wound for Huang Qin, and when he learned that Lu Zhou would be visiting for National Day, he could no longer suppress his rage. The years of feeling belittled and inferior had culminated in a burning desire for revenge. He wanted to make Lu Bao's family regret their classist treatment of him. The idea of humiliating Lu Zhou, the very person who had always been a symbol of the family's higher status, consumed him. This resentment ultimately led him to commit the crime that would change everything. The plan and heinous acts of the killer. On the evening of October 3rd, before Lu Zhou had returned home, Huang Qin stealthily entered her room and set up a hidden camera in her bathroom. The next morning, on October 4th, when the entire Yang's family had left the house, he checked the camera and collected the compromising photos of Lu Zhou in the nude, with the intention of blackmailing her. He sent these photos to her phone, using a dual SIM phone. He sent the messages from the less frequently used SIM, hoping to confuse and alarm her. He threatened to release the photos online and send them to her boyfriend and family unless she complied with his demands. Fearing the consequences for her family and boyfriend, Lu Zhou felt she had no choice but to obey Huang Qin's demands. She gathered all the money she had saved up and went to a designated meeting spot where Huang Qin instructed her to collect the photos. However, as she was unfamiliar with the area, she became lost and ended up walking down a dirt road that led toward a field of reeds. Unbeknownst to her, Huang Qin was still watching her, and when she reached the desolate area, he emerged from the shadows. He overpowered her and carried out the horrific act he had planned. Initially, his intention had only been to extort money from her as revenge, but upon seeing Lu Zhou's fear, his darker instincts took control. After assaulting her, his hatred intensified, and in a fit of rage, he drew a knife and repeatedly stabbed her. Despite having no prior experience with murder, Huang Qin became increasingly brutal, his strikes growing more violent until Lu Zhou was no longer breathing. After killing her, he took her money, her phone, and the weapon before fleeing the scene. It wasn't until October 10th, when Lu Bao happened to check her husband's phone, that she stumbled upon the photos of her sister-in-law that Huang Qin had kept as trophies. Huang Qin showed no remorse for his actions. To him, the murder was not an act of regret, but rather the culmination of a long-held desire for vengeance. The bitterness he felt had twisted his perception, leading him to see the entire Yang's family as enemies, despicable individuals who had no right to look down on his perceived uselessness. In his warped mind, this act was a form of liberation, a way for him to reclaim the respect he felt he had lost. The just verdict and a warning to society. Finally, after thorough investigation, everything was made clear, and the severity of the case was undeniable. The police had gathered enough evidence and identified the key witnesses. The case file was forwarded to the prosecution, and preparations for the trial were set into motion. Lu Bao became the key witness in her sister's case. She had loved her husband deeply. Despite her family's objections, she had hoped for a happy ending to her marriage, but never could have imagined that the man she had chosen to love would turn into a monster, brutally murdering her sister in such a horrific manner. The sentencing for rape and murder varies depending on the laws of the country and factors such as the circumstances of the crime, motive, and any aggravating or mitigating circumstances. In particular, the punishment for rape can be severe, ranging from several years in prison to a life sentence, depending on the seriousness of the act, combined with the murder charge, particularly when there are brutal actions like multiple stabbings. Xia Huang Qin was sentenced to death by the court. The death sentence would be carried out 3 months after the conclusion of the trial, in order to deter other criminals and send a strong warning to society. The widening gap between the rich and poor in today's society has had a profound impact on people's lives, turning material wealth into a defining factor in people's perceptions. If this inequality is not addressed in time, it could lead to unforeseeable consequences, especially in terms of character development. For someone like Xia Huang Qin, who lived as a son-in-law, The constant disrespect and contempt he faced was like a never-ending humiliation. However, if he had been able to sit down with his wife and discuss their marriage, perhaps this tragedy could have been avoided. Instead, his inflated ego and wounded pride led him to violence as a solution to his family conflicts. What do you think about the perpetrator in this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join the discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Decoder Box for more thrilling cases from around the world. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.